Life has a way of consuming us with its noise. For me, it was the routine of work, bills, and raising 3 children with my wife. 21 years of marriage had taught us how to survive storms together, but it had also left little space for reflection. In the rush of responsibilities, I hardly noticed what or who I was neglecting. One evening after dinner, my wife asked me to sit. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried weight. "There's something I want from you," she said softly. I leaned in, curious. "I want you to spend an evening with another woman," she continued. The words shook me. "What do you mean?" I asked, shocked. She reached for my hand. "I love you, but I know she loves you too. That woman is your mother. She's been waiting for your time. Please give it to her." Her words cut through me like a knife. That night, for the first time in years, I couldn't sleep. My mother had been widowed for 19 years. She lived alone in a modest apartment across town. Sometimes I called her. Sometimes I dropped by with the children on Christmas or her birthday. But the truth was, most of the time, she was alone. I told myself she was strong. I told myself she understood. But deep inside, I knew I had slowly drifted away from her. The next morning, after a restless night, I picked up my phone and scrolled to my mother's number. My thumb hovered over the call button longer than it should have. It felt strange. I had called her countless times before, but this one was different. This wasn't about duty or checking in. This was about presence. When she answered, her voice was soft and familiar, carrying the weariness of years, but still filled with warmth. "Mama," I began, my throat tight, "would you like to go out for dinner with me this Friday? Just the 2 of us." There was a long pause. For a moment, I thought the line had dropped. Then she spoke, her voice trembling with surprise. "Is something happening?" "No, nothing special," I said quickly, almost defensively. I want to spend some time with you." Another silence. This time, I could almost hear her emotions on the other end. Finally, she whispered, "I'd really love that." Her words stayed with me long after I hung up. They carried joy, but also an ache that told me she had been waiting for this moment far too long. That night, I sat at the edge of my bed, staring into the dark. Why had it taken my wife's reminder to make me see what should have been obvious? My mother had given me everything, and I had been giving her scraps of my time. Friday evening came, and I drove across town with nervous hands gripping the steering wheel. It felt almost unreal. Preparing to take my own mother out felt both familiar and strangely new. I caught myself rehearsing small talk in my head, like a boy on his first date. When I pulled up in front of her house, the door opened slowly. Then I saw her, and for a moment my breath caught in my chest. She had dressed up, not just neatly, but beautifully. Her hair was carefully styled, pulled back the way she used to when I was a child. She had applied a little powder, and she wore a dress I instantly recognized. It was the same dress she had worn years ago on her last wedding anniversary with my father. Time had softened its colors, but it still carried elegance. She stood there with a shy smile, holding her small handbag as though waiting for a suitor. "I told my friends I was going out with my son tonight," she said proudly as she stepped forward. "They were all curious. They want to know everything." Her words made me smile, but they also broke something inside me. Had I really left her with so little to talk about that one dinner was now an event to announce? She locked the door, slipped her hand into my arm, and for a moment, she was no longer the weary widow. She was a woman glowing with joy, walking into the night with her son. We drove in silence for a while, the quiet not uncomfortable, but weighted with anticipation. When we arrived at the restaurant, a small, intimate place tucked into a busy street, I hurried to open the door for her. She slipped her hand through my arm as we walked inside, her eyes darting around with childlike wonder. It wasn't fancy, but the way she looked at it, you would think I had brought her to a palace. The waiter handed us menus, and I noticed her tilting hers, squinting to see the words. Her eyesight wasn't what it used to be. I reached over and said, "Mama, let me read it for you." She looked up at me with a soft smile that nearly melted me. "When you were little, I used to read the menu to you. Do you remember?" A lump rose in my throat. "Then it's only fair that now it's my turn," I replied gently. Her eyes glistened as she listened to me read out each dish, just like she had once read bedtime stories to me. It wasn't about the food anymore. It was about roles reversed, love circling back to where it had begun. When she finally chose her meal, she leaned back, watching me with that same tender expression. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just feeding her dinner. I was feeding her heart, reminding her she was still seen, still cherished. When I got home that night, the house was quiet. My wife was waiting for me in the living room, her book resting closed in her lap. She looked at me curiously, as if searching my face for the answer before asking. "Well," she said softly, "how was it?" I sank into the chair beside her, still carrying the scent of my mother's perfume, still replaying her laughter in my head. My chest felt full, heavier than it had in years, but not with stress, with something richer. It was better than I could have imagined. I whispered. She dressed up, you know. She wore the same gown she wore the last time she and Dad celebrated their anniversary. She was so happy, like a little girl. And we talked, really talked, about everything. My wife's lips curved into a knowing smile. She reached for my hand and gave it a squeeze. That's all she ever wanted. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give isn't money or things, but simply our time. Her words sank deep into me. Time, something I'd given so little of, but which meant everything to my mother. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but replay the image of her glowing face across the dinner table. I didn't know it then, but that evening would become one of the most important nights of my life. It happened just a few days later. I was at work, buried in paperwork, when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but something in my chest tightened the moment I picked up. "Are you her son?" a trembling voice asked. It was my mother's neighbor. "Yes," I said quickly, already bracing myself. "She collapsed this morning. They rushed her to the hospital. Please come." The papers on my desk blurred. My hand shook as I grabbed my keys and bolted out of the office. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Each red light an enemy. Each second a lifetime. I prayed under my breath, bargaining with God, begging for more time. When I arrived, I ran through the hospital corridors, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the receptionist's directions. Then I saw the doctor step out of the ward, his face heavy with the kind of expression no one wants to see. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Her heart gave out. The world stopped. My knees weakened. I pushed past him and entered the room, where my mother lay still, her face calm, almost peaceful. I reached for her hand, still warm, and collapsed beside her bed. Tears poured until I could no longer breathe. The woman who had given me life, who had smiled like a girl just days ago, was gone. And all I could cling to was the memory of one dinner, one evening that had almost never happened. The days that followed blurred together in grief. I went through the motions, arranging the funeral, answering calls from relatives, sitting through endless condolences, but inside, I was empty. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smile at that dinner table, her eyes sparkling like a girl's. That memory became both my comfort and my torment. A few weeks later, as the weight of her absence grew heavier, the mailman handed me a small brown envelope. My name was written on it in a handwriting I knew instantly, delicate, careful, and familiar. My mother's. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a folded receipt from the very restaurant we had gone to, paid in advance. My heart stopped. Attached to it was a small note in her handwriting. I didn't know if there would be a next time, so I paid for two. This is for you and your wife." That evening meant so much to me. "I love you, my son." I sank into a chair, clutching the paper against my chest. My tears fell freely, staining the ink. Even in her last days, she had been thinking ahead, making sure she gave something back. It wasn't the money, it wasn't the receipt. It was the love. Love so deep it planned for tomorrow she wasn't sure would come. That envelope was her final gift, and it shattered me all over again. For days I carried that note in my pocket, unfolding it again and again, as if reading her words could bring her back. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a mirror reflecting everything I had overlooked. I began to realize how fragile time truly is. We always think there will be another call, another visit, another chance. We postpone love, telling ourselves we'll make it up later. But sometimes later never comes. That night with my mother had seemed so ordinary, a simple dinner, light laughter, forgotten stories. Yet, it became the most extraordinary memory of my life. If I had delayed, even by one more week, it would have never happened. I started looking at my family differently. When my children called my name, I paused what I was doing to listen. When my wife wanted to talk late at night, I no longer brushed her off with tired excuses. I realized that the greatest inheritance we leave isn't money, houses, or land. It's love. It's presence. It's the memories we build with the people who matter most. My mother had taught me that lesson in life, but her final note drove it deeper into my soul and death. I promised myself I would never again allow busyness to rob me of the moments that truly mattered. Her last dinner was no longer just a memory. It was my new way of living. When people ask me about the most important night of my life, I don't mention my wedding or the day I signed my biggest business deal or even the births of my children. Those days were precious, yes, but none of them changed me the way one simple evening with my mother did. That dinner, in a small restaurant with fading lights and ordinary food, became the turning point of my life. Not because of the menu or the laughter or the stories we shared, but because it reminded me of what I had forgotten. That love is not proven by grand gestures, but by small, consistent moments of presence. I often think back to her glowing face, dressed in that old gown, holding my arm like it was the most special night of her life. And I ache when I remember she never got the chance to invite me back, even though she had already paid for it. But her final act of love continues to guide me. Now, I tell anyone who will listen, don't wait. Don't assume there will be another chance to say I love you, to sit down for a meal, to simply be there. Because nothing is promised. My mother left me many gifts, courage, resilience, faith. But her last and greatest gift was the reminder that what really matters is not tomorrow, not achievements, not possessions. What matters is love, lived today. If this story touched you, kindly like this video and comment your thoughts. We'd like to hear from you. And if you're new to our channel, please subscribe to Tales by Mary Wealth for more interesting stories like this. See you in our next story.